As many people know this week, Officer Ella French was laid to rest. It's been quite a dramatic week regarding developments as it relates to the shooting that happened. I believe it was a week and a half ago. And I don't know, I just felt out of honor to Officer French. I would share a little bit from the ceremony before we actually got into some of the news that corresponds with it. How loud this is.
So many poignant moments, Tanya, and I think one of them being the eloquent words from Cardinal Blaise Supich describing Ella as a woman of empathy for the sufferings of others, humble enough to know she could always improve, and generous to the point of dedicating her life to making a difference in our world.
So I don't think there should be any controversy surrounding what happened in this tragedy with Officer French. But of course, there's a lot of chatter on social media regarding some things. I want to just quickly quote from the Tribune before we talk about some of this stuff. The slain Chicago, this comes from the Tribune, slain police officer Ella French helped us save a baby who was shot in Englewood this summer, rushing the infant and the mother to the hospital on her own. She chased stray dogs down the street while on duty so she could take them to the animal shelter. She brought banana bread and cinnamon rolls to work for her colleagues. She listened to people, even those who were angry and disrespectful, so she could better understand them. Amid stories about her compassion and desire to help others, French was eulogized Thursday at a funeral, replete with the traditions and tributes bestowed upon a police officer killed in the line of duty. And as a side note, I also recall reading a story that there was that horrible incident, I think it was before Lori Lightfoot took office, where the police had burst into a home. They had the wrong address, and they kind of traumatized this woman who wasn't dressed. I'm forgetting the lady's name now. But of course, the city tried to cover it up, and the lady had to file a Freedom of Information Act request, and now she's suing the city. Turns out Officer French was not part of the initial police entourage that entered that wrong address, but she showed up afterwards to help this traumatized woman, give her covering, and basically be there to help, I don't know, I guess, try to normalize the situation for her after the police had left. So as we heard in that news report, she was obviously an officer of compassion. She seemed to have the type of compassion we hope all officers would have, along with the empathy that she showed others. And I think it was a fitting tribute that so many people showed up to her funeral. And I really hope that the compassion and empathy everyone knew her for is embraced by the police department instead of turning her into some kind of a martyr to distract from the business as usual that we normally see from CPD. It's a hot button topic, and I know that I'm probably going to get a lot of, unhappy people tonight on both sides of the aisle as we talk about both sides of the situation. I mean, we can recognize that Officer French was a decent officer. She exemplified what I think law enforcement should be about. And then we also know that there are going to be others on the other side who are going to use this and glom onto it as the reason that we have to increase spending on the police department, how we have to ignore many of the mandates that Mayor Lightfoot has been proposing to hopefully get police to de-escalate as opposed to escalate in really tight situations. What are some of your thoughts on what you're hearing on the streets here too with this, Daniel?
So my own thoughts are very mixed. So generally speaking, when I think of police and the issues that we have with police, I very much do think of them. I try to almost minimize the individualness, and I really think more of it as a group, as a system of people. So I can understand and feel very empathetic for the death of someone who, by all accounts, seemed to be good and doing good. But I feel like it's not in the big picture of what happens. I think in the long term, I think it's actually more likely to be negative for the people of the city because of the last part that you just brought up, that there's a very good likelihood that the police are going to use this as an example mentally within their own people that, hey, this is why we don't give people a second to react. This is why we shoot first. I always mention on the show that police are trained that if there's a 5% chance that the family is going to hurt you, just shoot them all. And that's the way that they're trained to act. And so I think this is going to just reinforce that. I think that's going to reinforce that. And I think that, I don't know how to do the math on this because there's really no way to actually count, but it wouldn't surprise me that if her death led to police shooting 2 innocent people as kind of that default mindset. So in a lot of ways, I almost feel irrelevant to her death. Because I first would cover so many deaths of so many people. And I always think of, how many times have the police put on a grand funeral like that for someone that they shot that they shouldn't have because they didn't enter the wrong place. Mm-hmm. The person didn't have a gun they thought they did. The person was a kid who was shot when he didn't have a gun when they thought he did. So I'm very conflicted. I think on an individual level, I completely agree with everything you said. But I worry on the big picture that this is really bad.
I'm conflicted on it a bit also. When we first reported on the circumstances surrounding the shooting last week, there were some comments posted on our YouTube channel questioning the validity of the police department's accounting of what happened, given the fact that all the police in the situation wore body cams. And my first instinct was I saw the 2 suspects, I saw the shooter and I saw his brother, and I thought, I hate to broad stroke, but just looking at these guys and knowing that they were carrying an illegal weapon, I'm more prone to believing the police department's account of things, because eventually when they're in court, those police cameras are going to have to be shown. And I would imagine that if CPD decided to fudge the facts right now, there would be hell to pay later if it turned up in court that the body cams on the police officers actually showed something different. Now, there was a big, social media outcry this week that I saw where people were very, very upset that the court suppressed the release of the body cam videos, which I believe would have proven the veracity of the police department's accounts of what happened. But what people missed was the fact that it was the defense attorneys that requested the court suppress the release of the body cam videos. So that would tend to lead one to think that obviously those tapes are pretty damning to the defendants, and you don't want to taint a jury pool by the time this goes to trial. So, at a certain point, cooler heads do have to prevail. One of the things that I thought was, those body cams would definitely show what happened. But here's the issue, too. I got into with somebody on Facebook who was very angry that I would suggest that the police department would suggest something that wasn't on the body cams. I said, look, if there hadn't been questions about previous police body cam footage that had been suppressed in the past, whether it had to do with Laquan McDonald or Adam Toledo, and the police were more forthcoming in those circumstances instead of playing cover up, I would then probably be at fault to believe the police accounts. But the reason there's so much distrust is because we've seen in the past what happens when body cam footage is suppressed, covered up. It's usually them scrambling behind the scenes to figure out how they can change the narrative. I don't think that this was a circumstance in the suppression of this particular police cam footage that has anything to do with covering anything up, given the fact that it was the defense that requested the court suppress this video until they go to court. Because, of course, there are questions about tainting a jury pool and, public perception of what's going on without the defendants getting a fair trial.
Yeah, I agree with that take completely. That's exactly the way that I would interpret it. I guess I think it's fair to say that if you're going to suppress something, you probably don't want it to come out. And if you're, so that makes a lot of sense. I think that, this seems like a rather straightforward case. Again, we'll wait and see what happens the same way we do with everyone else. But again, it's always in my mind, whenever these happen, I just kind of go to the duality of how, just imagine if the citizens of Chicago were given a budget for this kind of defense prosecution. I just feel like it's a lot of what we're dealing with, especially is the police have hurt their own reputation so bad by doing so many terrible things that it's, like I said, again, to me, it's much more the systemic issue. And this person is just a single story, 3x plus y equals, and that's this person in this circumstance. But, we're going to have to wait and see, but it does. I do agree with your take.
Now, while we can be critical of how the police handle things outside of this circumstance, where it appears from what we've heard The police, including Officer French, who had been involved in this traffic stop, were following proper procedure. It's also ironic to me, again, on the fence. It's hard to like call it one way or the other when you find out that the judge, I guess, released the suspect who purchased the weapon in Indiana and gave it to the shooter that killed Officer French. Now, this comes from Block Club Chicago, and I'll bring this screen up, and I'll read from some of this article because it's surprising to me that this happened given everything surrounding the incident. Top cop blasts federal judge calling release of alleged straw buyer and slain officer's case an outrage. And this comes from Block Club Chicago. Chicago's top cop slammed a federal judge for setting a low bond for the Indiana man charged with illegally buying and providing the gun used in the slaying of Chicago police officer Ella French, calling it an outrage. Police Superintendent David Brown on Wednesday put out a statement criticizing the $4,500 bond set for Jamel Danzy, leading to his supervised release. To say that I'm extremely disappointed in U.S. Magistrate Judge Jeffrey Gilbert's decision to release Jamel Danzy on an unsecured bond today is an understatement, Brown said. It is an outrage. French was shot and killed at 9 p.m. Saturday during a traffic stop in Englewood. We know those details. Amonte Morgan has been charged with first-degree murder of a peace officer. Danzy, 29 of Hammond, was charged in federal court with conspiracy to violate federal weapons laws for allegedly buying the gun used in the shooting. He was ordered released Wednesday, drawing the angry statement from Brown, who has repeatedly criticized the court system for releasing suspects. Now, I do know that there's been a lot of back and forth on Superintendent Brown criticizing the court for releasing violent offenders. More often we hear from the court that they're releasing nonviolent offenders. But I got to say, in this circumstance, I am kind of perplexed why the judge would set such a low bond and let this guy go supervised, given the severity of what happened. And I have to think, I actually spoke with a friend of mine in the court system for their opinion on this today. And they said to me, this judge would not want to cover his ass, would want to cover his ass in releasing this guy. So there must be something that came out during the sentencing and the bond setting that apparently allowed this judge to release this guy, because maybe there was some kind of a detail that was missed, something the cops missed, some kind of glitch that made the judge feel that this was the right decision to make.
Are you aware in this, from what what they want to charge him with, what that would entail if he was charged with it? Like how many years? Because it just seems to me like in America, illegally moving guns is like stealing bubble gum in terms of severity that we put on it. So I wonder if the reason that happened, especially since this happened and this purchase happened in Indiana, where, as we know, it's very lax in these cases. I just wonder if this is the going rate for selling someone a gun.
Well, the Block Club Chicago article further says the gun found at the scene was the same Glock registered to Danzy. So this guy bought the gun in Indiana, was registered to him, the feds said, and the Honda CRV that the Morgan brothers were allegedly in when the officers pulled them over was also registered to Danzy, according to a criminal complaint. So I would imagine in some way of law that he's an accessory to what happened, given the fact the Glock was registered to him and he was driving them around. The fact that he's out on supervised bail, though, I don't know. That seems to support a lot of what Superintendent Brown is saying about the courts releasing more potentially dangerous perpetrators than the nonviolent offenders that probably shouldn't be held, that should be drawing a lower bail because they're not any kind of a threat while they're clogging up the system, along with violent offenders.
Yeah, I'm sure it's hard also because this is across state lines, even Indiana thing. So maybe the federal government's going to get involved with this, but I just, in the cases that I remember us covering on things of this nature, that we've been also very upset about the low bails on people being released. It just seems consistent with what I remember of our Hardlands stories covering crossing state lines instance. And he could literally have in court said, I forgot the gun in the car, or, there's a lot of different things that he can say, or there's a huge amount of technicalities that a normal lawyer could just talk about, like, hey, yeah, we thought we were just giving him the car, but I left the gun in there. Or I talked to him thoroughly about what he needed the gun for, and he said, I need it for self-protection. A lot of people are threatening me. So I don't know. I feel like, and if he was able to, if they were able to show, or they were arguing, the lawyer argued on his behalf that he's not going to go anywhere. He's just going to be where he is. I mean, I could see this turning out the way it did.
We'll just have to wait and see what happens in court. This was Superintendent Brown actually critical of the media and how they were, how they tend to hold the police more accountable than the court system. This came from Fox 32.
Serious consequences in our courts.
Chicago's top cop zeroing in on the courts once again after another violent weekend leaves at least 12 dead and dozens of others hurt.
Elizabeth Matthews is live at Chicago Police headquarters with the very latest. Elizabeth?
Chicago Police Superintendent David Brown is not mincing words. He is adamant that part of the problem with the violence on the streets of Chicago is the fact that violent offenders keep getting released on electronic monitoring. This weekend, like you mentioned, 70 people in the city of Chicago were shot. 12 people were shot and killed. The superintendent says his department recovered 104 weapons this weekend, nearly 6,900 this year. Chicago police officers are doing their part, he says, but the courts are not doing theirs. Brown is pointing to the fact that 90 people have been charged with murder and also released on electronic monitoring. The chief judge has said in the past that those cases are all first-time offenders or were in self-defense.
My question to you is, ask what the courts can do different. Rather than release violent people back to these communities to create an environment of lawlessness, can the courts hold people in jail who are violent, who have been arrested, who have been charged with murder? Murder. I don't think there's another city in this country releasing people charged with murder back into the community on electronic monitoring.
Yeah, you know, all criticism of the police department aside, I can't disagree with him on that. It's difficult.
Yeah, I think that. So I would look at this from the precedent of when, like, we did like 3 strikes rules in like California and other places. That did not work either. I think that in a lot of ways, this is. It's like how I talked about the pandemic. It's like when we're at this point that we're at with this slain officer and everything that's happened, we've already failed before this even happened. All the systems that are in place. So right now, police barely solve murders. They barely solve most serious crimes as it is right now. So, you know, on that side, so their turnover percentage is very low. Then you look at the court systems. On one hand, what they used to do is if you did anything, you smoked a joint in the wrong place at the wrong time and in the wrong condition, you're going to jail for your entire life. Yeah. And now we're kind of on maybe a flip side of that. I feel like this is just another example. Like I said, she is just one output of a overall set of systems that we're dealing with. And of course, nothing's going to work out right. When the police kill someone, they don't get to go in trouble. They get paid vacation. That's not a good thing. When someone sells a gun to someone or however that transaction happened to someone and they shoot someone, nothing's really happening because of gun lobbies and how they've worked out, how all this stuff happens. We're watching a failed system be a failed system, and everyone's acting shocked like it's not working. And I think in a way, to the superintendent, I can't help but feel a bit of hypocrisy of how he's acting when it's one of his own that he's trying to protect versus the litany of times where it's someone that was completely innocent that they shot, where they literally do the exact opposite speech. Oh, our officers did everything could. They were scared. The guy moved his hands too quickly, and therefore it was right that we shot him. So I feel that at least I know he must feel the way that he's feeling. I'm not disagreeing with that at all. But it's not a consistent. It's not a consistent standard that's being applied between everyone. And I think that as soon as that happens, just as a concept right away, you've already failed before you started. And then you get a circumstance like this where the police are, I think, justifiably really upset that this whole transaction happened. But they've also set a lot of precedents at other times where they're fine with these things happening.
Yeah.
So
Alvarez and Toledo body cam shootings.
Yeah, it just seems like the entire system's a mess within a mess within a mess, and everyone's acting like, why is it a mess? And I think also, frankly, because it's so rare that cops are actually killed, we just don't see these cases in these circumstances as often. So I think also the police are just not used to the system that they are usually fine with turning against them.
Yeah, very true. And as we talk about how, they are right. Ella French is rightfully being elevated. We also, well, I'll go on and you'll understand where I'm going with this. Did you know that Officer French left behind an infant child?
I did not hear that.
Well, she didn't, although we had heard this all week long. No, Chicago police officer Ella French didn't leave behind an infant child. Ella French, a 29-year-old Chicago police officer who was shot. In the days since, social media users have posted about someone else French supposedly left behind, an infant. This is Officer Ella French, conservative commentator Ryan Fournier said on Facebook on August 8th. She was shot and killed last night in Chicago while responding to a call. She leaves behind a 2-month son. Kaylee McEnany, press secretary for then President Donald Trump, tweeted that she had a 2-month-old daughter and that, quote, Ella sacrificed her life in the line of duty and her daughter will grow up knowing her mother was a hero. I heard this all last week and it broke my heart. Other widely shared posts echoed this. One said she had just got back from maternity leave, but that's wrong. These posts were flagged as part of Facebook's efforts to combat false news and misinformation on its news feed. On August 9th, Stephanie Lulay, managing editor of Blog Club Chicago, a nonprofit news outlet in the city, wondered in a series of tweets why international news sites, national pundits, and even police departments reported that French was survived by her newborn child while local Chicago newsrooms didn't. Because it wasn't true, Lulay said. Ella French's brother, Andrew French, told the Chicago Sun-Times that his sister wasn't married and had no children. Brown also said this during an August 8th news conference. A reporter asked about rumors that French had just returned from maternity leave and had a child. That's not accurate, Brown said. You can watch the exchange about 17 minutes into a recording of the conference at the link that's on this page. But the reason I bring that up with the lionization of Officer French is that while we don't know what's happened yet, already you've got those on social media running to make a martyr out of her for exactly the reasons we discussed earlier. Once the narrative starts to get out of control and they start reporting all these, I mean, that's a heartbreaking story were it actually true. But for a week, I believed it until suddenly I just came across this article today that said, no, she didn't leave an infant behind. She doesn't have any children.
So this, again, now we're on almost, I would even say, a whole separate topic when we're getting to this point. Now we're strictly in media matters and politics. So this is gilding the lily. This is what we've seen a lot. And it's also very funny in that a lot of the same people that have made all these claims are the same people that chastise and do 20 segments anytime this happens on the other side in the other direction.
Yep.
So first of all, just hypocrisy again, just like I was saying, everyone is so busy picking their tribe and sticking to it that no one cares about the consistency of the facts, the consistency of improving things. So just like I talked about before, that it's a big issue that the police don't really solve crimes. But then other people say it's a hard, it's the problem is that things aren't getting done. I don't care about words, I care about action. So in this case, when people are talking that, she left behind a small child, that's simply done because they think it's a juicier story. What's a better story? I mean, again, we know a lot of the places and we know a lot of the personalities that like to spread this kind of message. So I'll kind of speak in the terms that they would use. What's a better story than a black man in a ghetto shooting a woman police officer who was a very good person if she also had a child that no longer has a mom? It's just a better headline. And everyone's rolling with it. And then on top of it, you have, as you mentioned, mainstream outlets that are rolling with it as well. I don't see their videos getting limited on YouTube for this because they're authoritative sources.
Right. Well, it's diversion. It's distraction and diversion away from what was actually going on to, I think get more positive vibes towards the police department or to create more empathy for the situation that the police are in all the time. There's a comment in the live chat I want to share here from Goatface, and they say she and her crew rolled up on those guys for bad tags and were about to ruin their lives. Sorry she got shot, but who started it and over what? A botched highway robbery by the biggest gang in town. bad tags could indicate that the vehicle was stolen, and that is the police department's job to do. If the tags were bad, they had every right to pull over that car, and unfortunately, I don't understand why, if you've got bad tags on a car, you think that it's all right for the people inside the car to just pull out the gun when the police are asking them to get out and shoot them. Sorry for that difference of opinion, Goatface, but I completely disagree with you.
Actually, ironically on this, because we've covered a couple of stories along, so I think I agree with you that it's not the right take, but I can want to see if I can make a little bit of a connection of why that's being said. So I know we've covered.
I know why it's big. No, go ahead. I mean, I understand why, and I have empathy for that also. But given what happened, go ahead. We've covered a number of stories where like the police come and they find a small issue, and then they escalation.
It's like
escalation.
And this will just get back to what I was saying before, that like the fact that I definitely agree with your take on this one, Drew, but I can also empathize with Goatface to some degree. And it's like the fact that I can do both of those again gets back to my original point, which is the fact that things work this way is because our system's bad and everyone's working within a bad system, and then bad outcomes are obvious outcomes.
Yeah, no, I do see both sides of it. I just think, given where we are right now, it just seems like it's a bit of a insensitive remark or insensitive take right now until we see how things play out, given what transpired. But given how concerned that the police department is with elevating Officer French's legacy, both Mayor Lightfoot and Superintendent Brown botched her name on 2 different occasions. Check this out. This is from Fox 32. Chicago Mayor Lightfoot botched fallen officer Ella French's name just days after Chicago Police Superintendent David Brown did the same. The horrible tragedy of Ella Frank's murder, Lightfoot said during the 2022 Budget Engagement Forum held at Truman College on Thursday. Of course, the flub was criticized by the Chicago Fraternal Order of Police, which tweeted on Friday that this was one of those times when words really matter. I guess they didn't hear when Superintendent Brown referred to Ella French as Ella Fitzgerald, which happened a few days earlier. The Fraternal Order of Police, their tweet. This is just the Fraternal Order of Police, of course, going apeshit with their hair on fire. Her name was Ella French, not Frank French. This was one of those times when words really matter. Please, her name was not Ella Frank. Her name was not Ella Fitzgerald. Her name was Ella French. Well, I would agree, but I don't see the same amount of criticism aimed at Superintendent Brown, where he says, Lightfoot botching her name comes just days after Brown referred to French as Ella Fitzgerald twice on Monday. The offender who was charged with first-degree murder of Ella Fitzgerald, Brown said at one point during the press conference. The gun used in the shooting and this murder of Ella Fitzgerald was illegally possessed. He said at another point, Ella Fitzgerald, as we know, is the name of an award-winning jazz singer who died in 1996. The flubs come after Lightfoot received an icy greeting from police officers in the city last week when she visited the hospital where French's partner is being treated for critical injuries stemming from the shooting. And that officer lost his eye, unfortunately. So
yeah.
Go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, this, I feel like I'm almost on a broken record with every update that we have with this. It's everyone's just being like, this is the problem. This is a general problem with America. We see it everywhere nationally, see it locally, we see it internationally. It's just the way that the U.S. empire is at this point where, and this is, I guess, really a lot of what I'm taking out of this, and this is like the vibe I'm getting from this entire story over and over again is, I feel like people don't really care about her. I feel that everyone just cares.
She's a symbol now. She's a symbol for what each side can do, or how they can claim it for themselves for their own agendas.
She's just a resource for different tribes to use against each other. She's a weapon to be used against the other side, and nothing more. That's kind of where I've been trying to exactly figure out the words I'm using for, but that's basically it. It's every single step of this entire process. There isn't, like, even the funeral to me seems just symbolic and not really about her or for her. It's although I'm sure, again, there are people that are be there where that's definitely true that did know her, but the amount of people that turned up, I don't think all of them know her, but I think all of them were like, I can relate because I have to make a story out of this that connects to my own worldview. No one cares about her in the big scheme of things. No one really cares about the people that shot her. No one really cares about the gun, how it was obtained. No one cares about any of that. The police chief cares so little that he doesn't get her name right. The police union's so mad at Lightfoot that they're going to attack her, even though it's hypocritical to do so. No one cares about this event. Everyone is just using it as ammunition, and that's the problem that we have. That's the problem with every step of this process. The police don't like the way that the courts are dealing with it, because the police want to make the point that anyone that comes after any cop for any reason, for whatever, is a terrible person, needs to be dealt with the full extent of the law. So when the courts do anything that doesn't support that, they attack the courts. When Lightfoot wants to say the things because she's already on bad terms with the police and she screws up something, and I'll even say, I'll give her the benefit of the doubt that she was just copying what the police chief said, who also got it wrong. She fails because, again, the police wanted to attack her and say, look, you made this happen. No one wants to take responsibility for any of this. The only people that aren't going to take responsibility are the people that are either going to go to jail or the people that are injured or died. Those are the only people that care are the people that are either in the hospital or in prison, and the people directly connected to them. Everything else in this is just politics.
Yeah, everyone around it, it's like vultures on the carcass. What can we take from this to serve our own agendas, to feed ourselves?
Yeah.
No, I agree with you completely, and I think that's a really good take on how everybody is taking this for their own agendas now, regardless of how this officer sacrificed her life, did not willingly, but in the line of duty, just doing her job.
Yeah, and it's like you can tell when someone, matters and these things are done properly and people care about a person. I've been to enough funerals. I know what that's like. I know what that looks like. This entire thing just feels like a show, and it's as distasteful as when it's the other way around and cops kill someone. Although I feel it's a little different because of the power dynamic in there. But I feel bad for her. Like I said earlier, that this happens, and I can empathize with all the people that do. But she's not really the star of the story. She's just the symbol.
Yeah, agreed.